Hey there, this is Claire from the Study Gurus. In today's video, I'm going to talk about why it's really important that you make the most of using past exams throughout your exam study. Using past exams was one of the most beneficial things that we put to use when we were preparing for exams. The benefits of past exams cannot be stated strongly enough. Past exams would honestly be in my top 5 things to put to use during exam study. And it doesn't matter if you're underprepared or really prepared, no matter where you are on that scale, past exams are your friend and you should be putting them to good use. So you can tell I'm pretty enthusiastic about using past exams when it comes to exam study. And here's the main reason why. The crucial mistake that tons of high school students make is failing to practice applying what they've learned. And sadly, this can be a really crucial mistake because sometimes exam questions aren't that nice. And pretty much all of the time, exam questions are designed to make you show the examiner that you really do understand what you're writing about. Your level of understanding of your subjects has to be such that when you're thrown a bit of a curly question or you're asked a question that makes you interpret what you've learned a little bit differently, you don't freak out. And this is where using past exams throughout the course of your exam study can totally save the day. Completing at least a couple of past exams before the actual exams will make sure that you are exam ready. So that's enough babbling from me. Here are 4 concrete things that you will get out of using past exams during your exam study. Number 1, going over past exams will tell you what types of questions you should be able to expect in the actual exam. The types of questions that come up in exams year after year tend not to change that much. And this means you can get a really good idea of the types of questions that are likely to come up in your exam. Sometimes students get into a massive pickle by not having thought about what types of questions are going to come up in the exam, and they might have prepared for, say, multi-choice questions when actually they're going to have to write essays or long-form answers in the exam. So looking at past exams and certainly giving them a go before you sit the exam is going to make sure that that never happens. Number 2, looking at past exams and giving them a go will tell you what type of content you should be focusing on during the course of your exam study. Looking at your subject as a whole, it's going to be made up of core content and more peripheral content. And looking at past exams will show you what the core content of that subject is. And it's the core content that you need to focus on when you're studying because that's what you're going to get examined on mostly. Core content is going to consist of the topics that you've spent the most time in class, the stuff that you've spent weeks on, the stuff that's really been the focus of your attention throughout the year. Having a look at some recently passed exams should confirm for you exactly what types of core content is likely to come up in the exam. That should be your focus, and then if you've still got time later on in your exam study closer to the actual exam, that's when you can, really go for those good grades and get some peripheral content under your belt to really impress the examiner. Number 3, looking at past exams should give you a really good indication of how many questions are going to be in the exam. For instance, if it's a multi-choice question exam, you might find that there's probably going to be around 50 questions. Alternatively, let's say it's an artsy subject, you might have 2 hours to answer 4 essay questions that are all worth the same, which means you'll be spending about 30 minutes on each one. It might depend where in the world you are as to what extent you can find out exactly how many questions are going to be in the exam. But I know at least when I went through high school, I would know before we went into exam that, okay, I'm going to have 2 essay questions to answer and 5 shorter answer questions, for instance. But quite often it is possible to actually find out not what the questions are going to ask, but what type of questions they're going to be and how many there are. And number 4. Looking at past exams will give you a really good idea of what the layout of the exam is going to be. By layout of the exam, I mean things like what order are the questions in? How much room do you have to provide an answer? Are you given heaps of lines or not very many to answer something that's actually quite hard? Approximately how long is the exam paper? Knowing what the layout of your exam paper is likely to be will be a huge comfort when you walk into the exam and actually open the real one. So overall, the thing I want you to take away about past exams is that they take away any major surprise. No, of course, you're never going to know exactly what the questions are going to ask. And sometimes they like to throw in a really hard curveball, questions that you couldn't have anticipated. But looking at past exams and completing at least a couple in the amount of time that you'll have in the exam is going to take away so much of any surprise and shock. Apart from maybe a few curly questions in the exam, nothing should be too much of a surprise. It should be mostly as you expected. If you were expecting essays, there should be essays, etc. And not only does looking at past exams make you prepared for what's coming, it makes you prepared to give proper exam answers. As I mentioned earlier, it makes you apply everything that you've studied. It makes you know what kind of answers they're looking for. It makes you know how you're going to have to put to use all of the knowledge that you've stuffed into your head over the last few weeks of study. A lot of high school students fall into a trap of studying really hard, but not going through this crucial process of applying their knowledge. And consequently, they can be faced with a kind of tricky exam question and get thrown. Even though technically they know their stuff, they haven't practiced putting it into the form of an exam answer. So even if you haven't covered as much as you had hoped you would during the course of your exam study, and say your exams are only a few days away, I would highly recommend setting aside some time and doing at least 1 or 2 practice exams. The time that you spend applying the knowledge you have learnt is going to be much more beneficial than just trying to cram in more knowledge. I think I've gone on long enough now about how awesome using past exams can be, so now it's your turn to go out there, find some past exams that you can get your hands on, or even just some practice questions from a textbook that mimic what past exam questions have been, and go for it yourself.